friends. Are you ready to read chapter 4 of Chasing Helicity? When we left off, we found out that Mr. and Mrs. Dunlap and Helicity realized that Andy was in the hospital having surgery and they were wanting to go there. Are you ready? Here we go. The police didn't want them to leave the school. It's dangerous out there, Pete informed them grimly. Downed power lines, potential gas leaks, unstable. My son is in surgery at the hospital. Mrs. Dunlap thrust out her chin. We're going. You have a car. Take us there, now. Helicity had rarely seen her mother so forceful. Pete stared at her for a long moment. Unflinching, she returned the look until he relented. Hang on, he conferred with another officer and then tossed Helicity a blanket and pulled out his keys. Okay, let's go. They were at the door before he finished speaking. Helicity caught Pete's eye and mouthed, thank you. He nodded and gave her a quick smile. Helicity and her mother got in the back seat where Helicity wrapped herself in the blanket. Her father rode up front with Pete. As they drove out of town, they passed pockets of unbelievable devastation. It's exactly like they say on the news, her mother murmured. It's like a war zone. Mr. Dunlap didn't speak. He just sat, ramrod straight, and stared out the windshield, unblinking. Helicity noticed more this time on the slow drive through town. Every vehicle looked as if it had been taken to the junkyard and placed in the compactor, and placed perfectly back on the roads in a town as if it was a movie set. Andy had been in one of those vehicles. A trip that normally took 20 minutes took almost an hour, but they finally reached the hospital. Pete dropped them at the entrance and left to park. They hurried inside. The scene in the emergency room was as chaotic as the high school cafeteria. Helicity's father bullied his way to the admitting station, with Helicity and her mother close behind. Andrew Dunlap, he barked at the man sitting at the desk. Where is he? Are you family? The man replied. You need to fill out these forms. He tried to hand Mr. Dunlap a clipboard with papers. Helicity's father batted it to one side, lunged forward, and grabbed the man by his shirt. His face was a mask of fury. I was told my son is in surgery. Either you tell me what's happening right now or I'm coming around this counter. Do you understand me? I got this, Doogie. A woman with dark hair and light brown skin wearing blue scrubs strode over. Mr. and Mrs. Dunlap, I'm Dr. Sherez, the chief of surgery here. I saw Andy when he first came in. Please come with me. Helicity's father let go of the man, who shot him a dirty look. Dr. Sherez took the clipboard and led them to an alcove with chairs and a table. Andy's not in any danger, she reassured them, and as she sat, Mr. and Mrs. Dunlap sagged in their chair. However, the doctor added, he did sustain broken bones in the accident. Helicity's mother looked up. Broken bones? The doctor pursed her lips. Near as the first responders could tell, flying debris shattered the windshield. His injuries suggest he saw the debris coming. He flung up his right arm and twisted away to protect himself. She demonstrated angling her right arm in front of her forehead and turning to her left side. They assumed his left hand was still on the wheel, and the twist caused the car to veer violently. Andy lost control and ran off the road and overturned. Helicity's father sat forward tense. You said he had broken bones. What bones exactly? The right humerus, here. The doctor touched an area between the right shoulder and the elbow, and both the ulna and the radius here. She indicated a spot midway between her right elbow and wrist. She cleared her throat and glanced at Helicity. Forgive me, but I must be graphic. One end of the ulna, that's the bone on the outside that runs toward the pinky, was protruding through the skin. Mrs. Dunlap sucked in a sharp breath and fumbled for Helicity's hand. Her grip was crushingly painful, but Helicity didn't flinch. In such cases, the doctor continued, immediate surgery to repair the damage to muscle, skin, and nerves, as well as bone, is necessary. The bones are aligned and then fixated in place so they heal properly. Fixated in place? How? Mrs. Dunlap's voice was a faint whisper. With metal plates and screws. Applications of the device is external if at all possible, internal if not, which is likely the case with Andy's injuries. Internal, Mr. Dunlap echoed, and then another surgery to take them out? Removal's not always the best option, the doctor said cautiously. Sometimes it's preferable, even necessary for them to remain in place. Each case is unique. We'll evaluate Andy's situation as the healing process. It progresses. I see, Helicity's father said tightly. An orderly approached them and handed Dr. Sherez a chart. She glanced at it and stood. Andy's out of surgery. He's still sedated, but you can see him. It's my fault. Helicity stared at her brother through the glass. If she hadn't known it was him, she would have never recognized the figure laying on the bed. Cuts and bruises marred his handsome face. His hair was matted and his mouth hung slack. His right arm was encased in a cast from palm to shoulder, the elbow bent and his fingers and thumb free. A tube ran from his IV bag to his arm and another from a small tank to a pair of tubes in his nostrils. Wires connected him to machines that monitored his vital signs. Mr. Dunlap stared at Andy too. Then he pounded on the window with his fist, making Helicity jump. He looked at her. "I'm gonna get some coffee. I'd say text me if Andy wakes up before I get back, but what would be the point? Your phone is dead." He shook his head. "The one time your weather obsession would have actually been useful and you're off somewhere doing God knows what." He walked away down the corridor without another word. Felicity's mother rested her forehead on the glass, eyes closed. For a long time she didn't say anything, though her fingernails dug into the window edging. "Where were you?" she finally murmured. She sounded exhausted. "Why did you leave?" Helicity had forgotten all about the school letter. Now she dragged the crumpled mess out of her pocket. "I rode Raven up the hill. I needed somewhere to go so I could think about this." She held out the paper. Her mother glanced at it, then shut her eyes again. "What's to think about? Your teachers have evaluated your abilities and put you in CP. End of story." Felicity slowly wadded the paper up and shoved it back in her pocket. "Where's Raven?" Her mother's query took Helicity by surprise. "What? Raven?" Her mother opened her eyes and stared at Andy. "You said you rode him up the hill. Where is he now?" Felicity's stomach dropped into her shoes. I don't know. He spooked and threw me in." "He threw you?" Mrs. Dunlap straightened and looked at her fully for the first time in several minutes. "Are you hurt?" Helicity reassured her that she was fine, just a little bruised. She didn't mention the pounding hail it had given her, though she could feel where the stones had hit. But I haven't seen Raven since." Her mother reached out and touched her arm before returning her gaze to Andy. "He'll find his way home." A nurse had entered Andy's room. They watched her fussing over him. "He's young and strong. He'll be fine." Felicity wasn't sure if she was referring to Raven or Andy. Mr. Dunlap returned a few minutes later. He fished his wallet out of his pocket and gave his wife some money. "I booked us a room at the lakeside," he said, referring to a nearby hotel. "It's under your name." "The lakeside?" Felicity frowned. "Why do we need to go there? Can't we go home?" Her parents stared at her. "It was destroyed, Helicity," her mother said at last. "The house is gone." And just like that, another part of Felicity's world crumbled. She stood rooted on the floor like a statue, unable to breathe, while her parents discussed their immediate plans. "There's enough cash in there for a taxi and some food and some necessities if you need anything tonight. Use the credit card too if you have to," her father said. "Keep the receipts." "What about you?" her mother asked. "I'm staying here with Andy for now, but, he cut her off. "Listen, I need some time alone to think. This is going to impact our future. Don't you get that? I need to figure out what we're going to do now." His tone let them know that there'd be no argument. He went into Andy's room, closing the door with a firm click behind him. Downstairs in the hospital lobby, Helicity saw Pete by the front desk. Pete waved her over. "I didn't realize your brother was Andy Dunlap, the football star." He lowered his voice. "How is he?" Helicity filled him in on his condition. Pete gave a whistle. "Sounds grim. Do they know where he was headed when he was hurt?" "No." The lie slipped out before Helicity could stop herself. "I mean, they're not sure because he's still asleep after surgery." Pete nodded. "Of course. Well, no doubt he'll make a speedy recovery, seeing how he's in such a good shape. Still, it's a darn shame. I was looking forward to seeing him play for state." He shook his head. "Hang on," Helicity said, her brow creased with confusion. "What do you mean you were looking forward to seeing him play? You're not going to write him off just because he's injured, are you?" Pete looked surprised. Then his expression changed to one of understanding. He laid a hand on her shoulder. "Helicity, you should know that Michigan State might have to rethink their offer to him. They can't afford to waste a scholarship on a player who, well, might not be able to play as well as they had anticipated. If his injuries to his throwing arm are as bad as you describe," he spread his hands wide, "I'm not saying he won't get his chance, but it's possible his accident could affect his chance significantly." "This is going to impact our future," her father said. "Don't you get that?" Until that moment, Helicity hadn't gotten it, but now it was glaringly obvious. Andy's injuries could end his football career. He was coming to find me when he got hurt. That means, she took a shaky breath. "I'm responsible for the end of his career." Poor Helicity has a lot on her plate right now. She's trying to figure out how Andy's going to be, if he's going to be able to go to college, and if this is all her fault. All right, we'll read chapter 5 tomorrow.